Shalom, my name is Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artzon. I'm the Dean of the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies at the American Jewish University in Los Angeles. The Rabbinical Assembly is affording us an opportunity to learn together with other wonderful teachers, and I thank the Rabbinical Assembly for bringing us together yet again in a convocation of sacred learning using high tech. Right now I'd like us to talk about the Neilah service, which is the concluding service at the end of Yom Kippur. All of you have been through the cycle of Yom Kippur, which has a rhythm all its own, the excitement, the anticipation, somewhat trepidation that comes at the beginning. Am I going to make it? Am I going to be able to fast? Will my knees hold up? Will the Crocs help? And we go through the day with greater and lesser energy. For me, the low water mark of the energy is always the mincha service, where I'm just so fatigued and all I can think about is what I haven't eaten, what I haven't drunk, and how much of the service is left. But the energy picks up again with Neilah, and what I'd like us to think about is both the liturgical and the non-liturgical aspect of Neilah, the way the rabbis attempt to shape our thoughts and our approach to this service, and then the choreography of what's really happening. Like my service, I would imagine for most of you, the attendance at Mincha is pretty sparse. And then it picks up again as people start to drift back into the synagogue for what is emotionally the grand finale of Yom Kippur. They come together, and by the end of Neilah, the place is packed. There isn't room for anything. Fortunately, the rabbis anticipate this grand finale crowd by having everybody stand through the entire Neilah. Once the repetition begins, there's no more sitting. And that allows us to cram more people into the gymnasium-smelling synagogue as we prepare to end the fast. Neilah, you know, means closing, and refers originally to the closing of the gates of the Second Temple. At the very end of the day, the gates would be closed, and the Kohanim would shoo the people home. Off you go, you're done. So the full name in Mishnah Ta'anit is Neilat She'arim. It is the closing of the gates. Of course, early on in rabbinic tradition, this became poetic and metaphorized and spiritualized as Neilat She'arim, or Neilat She'arei Shamayim, which is the closing of the gates of heaven. The rabbis tell us that the closing of the gates of heaven is 1 hour later than the closing of the temple gates. Not clear why, but there's a bridge, a moment of opportunity between the shutting down of the gates of the Beit HaMikdash and the gates on high. It was during that time, we're told, that Rav used to cover himself with his talit and pray with a special fervor, because this was the waning of the day, and this was the last opportunity to slip your prayers into the heavenly gate. We stand, I think, because of our own eagerness, and in a sense because of God's eagerness to forgive us. So we rise to meet God halfway, as it were. But there's an interesting change that takes place. Throughout the Yom Kippur liturgy, we pray God, Chotvenu b'Sefer Chaim, write us into the book of life, inscribe us into the book of life. During this service, that word shifts, no longer Chotvenu, but now Chotmenu. You should seal us in the book of life. Whatever's been written has been written during the day. And so the poetic image we're invited to is of drying the signature, of making sure that it's in place, that it's sealed, it's not erased, it's permanent. The ink dries, our name is wherever it is. And it's at that moment that we stand. It's at that moment that we reach this finale where the room is packed. And our tradition offers us an interesting insight into that very reality. At the very end of this service, we blow the shofar one final great blast, the Tekiah Gedolah, that signifies to everyone it's over, you can go home. According to Rav Chai Gaon, The purpose of the blast was to recall the Jubilee blast. That is to say, a moment of great anticipation, great religious energy, a high water mark. But my favorite explanation is far more prosaic and comes from the Balei Tosfot from Masechet Shabbat 14b. They tell us that the purpose of the blast is not to sound like the Jubilee, it's to indicate to the mothers in the room that it's now permissible for them to go and make a meal for their children. And I want to draw your attention to a couple things. It's not for the clergy. This isn't about feeding the poor hungry rabbi or the starving cantor. This is not about taking care of the rich folk. This isn't even about feeding the men. This is about mothers turning to their children. The most important shofar blast of the entire 24-hour periods is for the moms. And it's for the moms and the kids. In a tradition that is often considered patriarchal, a tradition that can marginalize women and which sees men as the scholars and the powerful, what a remarkable thing that when we are convened as an entire people and we're all together, the blast of the shofar is for something physical, something embodied, something relational. We remind ourselves, yeah, we need to turn back to our children. We need to turn back to our loved ones. We need to turn back to our families. We need to turn back to feeding each other and nurturing each other. If the day means anything, then that great blast and the shutting of the gate is a reminder that we are not disembodied. We are not spiritual ghosts. What we are is flesh and blood, connected to each other in imperfect relationships, but always striving to make them better. And at the closing of the gates, we turn our attention not with a sense of being banished from the divine, but that the divine in fact pervades everything, is everywhere, and that it is found most of all in the eyes of those who love us and look to us, and in our capacity to reach out to them and offer them nurture and nourishment. Shalom.